Hi, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, as the case may be. And welcome to Story Hour once again. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My fabulous co-host is Laura Blackwell. And I hope that you are all healthy and safe and taking care of yourselves and each other in what continue to be deeply, deeply weird times. I started Story Hour during lockdown, the early throes of the pandemic, and my intention was just creating a space where my writer friends and I could kind of get together on a weekly basis and just share our work and just create a little island of community in kind of scary times. And shortly thereafter, Laura joined me as co-host, and it has grown so far beyond this initial scope that I had in mind. It's just mind-boggling. So we have been at it for 3.5 years, every week, week in and week out, except for the week between Christmas and New Year's. And we have had hundreds of authors just come through these rooms, all speculative fiction from within the very, very wide tent that speculative fiction is. Space opera, dark fantasy, horror, weird, slipstream, just all over the map. And it's been just a privilege. It's been really fun. So the way this works is pretty simple. It's kind of a time-honored form of entertainment, as folks sitting around the fire telling each other lies. And we do exactly that every week. So every author has a little less than 30 minutes, because I do a little bit of intro and what I'm doing right now. There's some reading series where they'll have maybe people can do novel portions or poems or whatever. We don't do that here. We love short stories here, and we love the narrative arc. And so it's really important for us that our authors can share with you, the audience, their creation, their full creation, a complete meal instead of little snacky bites. So full stories. And if people have like a couple of flash pieces or shorter works and want to fill that with their half hour, that's fine, as long as they're whole self-contained. And there's plenty of great reading series that don't do this, but we do pretty adamantly. So thank you again for joining us. I'm very pleased tonight to have Casey Grifant and Robert Levy. I'm also very happy to announce that we have received a SIFWA Givers Grant for 2023, so that we can continue to keep the lights on, keep these virtual rooms open, and continue to bring you what we believe is some of the best spoken word speculative fiction you can get anywhere. Before we go on to author recommendations of notable charitable concerns, I would like to call your attention to how you can support the writers on the front lines of WGA and the SAG-AFTRA strike. The Entertainment Community Fund, which, believe it or not, was founded in 1882. That's not 1982, that's 1882. They offer a huge spectrum of programs, workshops, support groups, online resources, and most importantly, in this context, emergency financial assistance to support the unique and essential needs of everybody who works in the performing arts and entertainment. So please check it out. And as I said, it's our custom to ask our authors every week to indicate a worthy cause for us to call your attention to. And if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to help financially, that's great. If you're not, just be aware. And if you're so inclined, spread the word. So Casey Grifant is reading tonight for the Trevor Project. That's thetrevorproject.org. The Trevor Project is committed to the belief that LGBTQ young people deserve a welcoming, loving world. To that end, they offer 24/7 crisis services, advocacy. They partner with public education, and they participate in suicide prevention research. And also they've created Trevor Space, which is a safe, affirming online community for LGBTQ young folks from 13 to 24. So check them out, trevorproject.org, and open your wallet if you can do that. If you can't, that's fine. Robert Levy is reading tonight for the Ali Forney Center. That's aliforneycenter.org. The Ali Forney Center was founded in 2002 in memory of Ali Forney, who was a homeless, gender nonconforming youth who was forced to live on the streets where they were tragically murdered. The Ali Forney Center is committed to saving the lives of LGBTQ plus young people, and their mission is to protect them from the harms of homelessness, to empower them with the tools needed to live independently. So please check those out. We're going to start the program tonight with Robert Levy. Robert's novel, The Glittering World, was a finalist for the Shirley Jackson Award, holy cow, as well as the Lambda Literary Award. And his shorter work has appeared all over the place, in places like FNSF, Nightmare, Black Static, the Best Horror of the year's Best Gay Speculative Fiction, his short story collection, No One Dies from Love, Dark Tales of Love and Longing. That's a great title, Robert. Was published by Word Horde in May. Trained as a forensic psychologist, we were just talking about that before the program. He teaches at the Stone Coast MFA program in creative writing and can be found at therobertlevy.com. Robert, welcome back to Story Hour, and the floor is yours. I think we have an audio issue, Robert. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Hey, all right.
I'm really more technically adept than I seem. It was telling me that the host needed to unmute me. But here I am, unmuted. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be back. And I'm excited to be reading with KC. Our charitable organizations seem very much aligned tonight. So it's definitely on theme for both of us. So I am going to read a story from my new collection that just came out a few months ago, No One Dies from Love. There it is. This is one of the first stories that was published in the collection. One of my first stories ever published was published about 15 years ago. And I've only read it once before long ago. So here I am reading it again. It is called The Rental Sister. And here we go. I'm kind of known for telling this story. And don't worry, it's a quick one, okay? This was the summer before I discovered acting and moved to the States, when I was still Shinju instead of Shannon. I was living in the Oyama district, waitressing on and off, and pretty much lost in life, working at an Italian restaurant at the time. There's little to no tipping in Japan, only from tourists, really. And I was complaining one day to my coworker Yoshiko about how I was having trouble paying my bills. That was the moment she suggested I make some money on the side as a rental sister. I had to ask what this was, and the answer was surprising and has to do with the hikikomori. That basically means withdrawal, and it's a big problem in Japan, what you would call a social epidemic. The hikikomori, almost all young men, close themselves off in their rooms for years and years, only coming out in the middle of the night to grab food before going back inside. It's like the way anorexia is here, you know, very popular. Once the family runs out of options, there are very few expensive treatment companies that you can contract. They send over a girl known as a rental sister who goes to your house to try to coax the boy out into the world. Yoshiko was working for Fresh Start, which was one of these companies. She said it was easy work and that she would be happy to refer me. Oh, and if they give you Koji Tanabashi and Meguro as your first, she said, as she wrote down the address of the company, don't tear your hair out over it. I didn't ask what she meant. Once I applied and was accepted at Fresh Start, I immediately started my training as a rental sister. They told me it's not like being a therapist or even an outreach worker, more like just a friend to talk to. Training was basically an afternoon of practice with my supervisor, Mr. Suzuki, and then a manual to read that evening. As Yoshiko predicted, my first assignment was, in fact, a 20-year-old man named Koji Tanabashi, my age, who lived in the Meguro district. That's in the suburbs, so I took the bus out there and read his one-page bio along the way. I also read the manual, which basically was not helpful, just things not to do, like do not be too flirtatious, do not be impatient, do not be aggressive, things like that. I went to the address and found myself at the doors of a large house, 2 floors and very modern. Or it probably was modern when it was built, maybe 50 years ago. Lots of concrete and very little glass, like an office building or a bomb shelter, but instead it was a house. I rang the doorbell. Mrs. Tanabashi, who turned out to be a very impolite woman, bowed quickly and then made her way through the expensive genkan and into the main hallway. "You are the 37th rental sister we have hired," she said in almost a whisper as I followed her up the staircase. "Maybe you will be the one." I decided that this was her way of telling me that she had already spent a great deal of money. We passed beneath a large skylight, and I remember looking up for a moment at the darkening sky. We went down the hall to the last door, which was on the right. I turned to Mrs. Tanabashi, but she had already pulled away and was heading back down the stairs. I wanted to leave as well. So, okay, I thought, you can do this. It's just like meeting a very quiet new friend, and I've had those before, so why not, you know? I kneeled down on the hard wood in front of the locked door and sat in silence. After a few minutes, I made sure Mrs. Tanabashi wasn't watching me. Then I reached into my rucksack for the manual and read from its suggestions for introductory phrases. "Hello, Koji." I was trying to sound fun. "My name is Shinju. Can you hear me?" Nothing. "I was hoping I could talk to you, and I heard you were a good listener. Is that true?" More nothing. I began to tell him about my day, about my friends, the restaurant, how I decided to join Fresh Start, except I said I joined because I liked talking with people instead of the real reason, which was because I needed the money. I tried anything I could think of that would be helpful and not aggressive, that might appeal to a hikikomori, even slipping a friendly note under the door if he preferred to communicate that way. I told him about the movie I had seen the previous week, the one I hoped to see the next, the book I was reading and how interesting it was. I even read from it for a while. Every moment as a rental sister is a race against time. For the longer a hikikomori is shut in, the less likely he is to emerge. By my watch, I could see that only a half hour had passed, and I was already running out of things to say. I pulled his bio out of my rucksack and looked it over again. There was nothing so very special about him I could grab onto, really just that he liked video games, and only video games. I hate video games because I find them addicting, you know? I would rather use that time to read a book. Anyway, I knew I had a great deal more work to do, so I kept going. A race against time, but also endless time. I can still picture that hallway as if I were standing in it now. The shell-lacquered credenza, the woven bamboo screen, and beside it the traditional watercolor of a fisherman returning to shore. Everything in its place, just so. Once the 3 hours were done and there was still no response from the other side of the door, I said goodnight and left the house. As I started down the path to the main street, I turned to stare back at the house, and the heavy curtains in one of the upper windows moved for a moment before it fell still. It was Koji's room. I gave a little wave and kept walking, sure that I was being watched as I went. I would have felt like a complete failure if it wasn't for seeing those curtains move. They kept me at it. I spent the next month making 3 weekly visits. I grew more prepared, more determined, so that when Mrs. Tanabashi would say anything, as I left each night, I might eventually have something to tell her instead of simply apologizing. I really did not like this woman. Her presence was always so heavy, being in a constant state of disapproval as she was, you know? I started playing video games at home on the computer, and then I would come back to Koji's door and recount what had happened in the game. In my mind, I was already improving, and so I talked on and on, endless one-sided discussions of what I was playing, my scores, who I encountered along the way, things like that. I was beginning to worry about my paycheck. One night, 6 weeks after I first started as Koji's rental sister, something finally happened. I'd already abandoned my video game idea, and having nothing left to share of myself, I started making up stories to tell. I was so bored by then, sitting alone for hours on the small tatami mat I would bring with me. I was surprised there was nothing comfortable already in place in front of the door, me being the 37th rental sister to put herself there for hours on end. I began talking about how I was going to move to the United States and become a famous actress, and that I would take him with me and we would live in Hollywood together. Just nonsense at the time. Now that I say it, I was acting even in that moment. I talked on, and then I feel something push against my hand, which is against the bottom of the door. I look down, and a Post-it note has been slipped out to me, and it says, "You are pretty." I laughed. I couldn't help it. I was just so grateful he had written anything at all, and that it wasn't to tell me to go away. "Why, thank you, Koji," I said. "You're a very nice young man, and I bet you are a handsome one as well." After another minute, he slips a second note under the door, and it says, "Not anymore." "Come now, I find that hard to believe," I went on. "You're so handsome in photographs, and no one loses that much beauty just by being alone." I hadn't actually seen a picture of him. There wasn't one in his bio or anywhere in the house that I could find. And yes, I was ignoring the advice in the manual, but I got through to him in my own way, didn't I? "I'll tell you what, if you open the door a crack, I'll tell you if you are handsome or not, okay?" Another minute passes, then another note, and it says, "I cannot open the door." "Koji," I said, going for playfulness, "what's wrong? Don't you like me anymore?" Then, very quickly this time, another note appears, and it says, "I am cold here." "Well, okay, I'll go ask your mother for a blanket, and I'll leave it outside the door for you to take after I'm gone." I went downstairs and found Mrs. Tanabashi in the kitchen, preparing her dinner. Her husband was an international businessman, and he was away from home a great deal. "You won't believe it," I said, so excited to tell her of my progress. "Koji started slipping me notes." I handed them to her, and as she read them, her eyes went wide with shock. Then she looked up at me, and her anger was impossible to mistake. "Wait for me in the genkan," she said, her back to me as she left the kitchen. I went to wait for her there, and it was almost an hour later. I had nothing to do but stare at the row of shoes beside the entrance, that the doorbell rang. Mrs. Tanabashi came to answer it, and it was Mr. Suzuki, my fresh start supervisor. He was furious. "Shinju," he said, You are a very irresponsible girl, and I want you to apologize to Mrs. Tanabashi. What have I done wrong? I asked him, and he turned to Mrs. Tanabashi, who handed him the notes. What are these? He said, holding them out to me. They're notes from Koji, I replied, taking them. He slipped them under the door when we were talking. Mr. Suzuki turned back to Mrs. Tanabashi. I'm so sorry, he said to her. She won't be coming back here. What's going on? I said, losing my patience. Tell me what I did. Enough of your lies, Shinju. I know you wrote these notes yourself. I would never do that, I said. Why would I ever do such a thing? Because someone must have told you that there's no one in that room. He looked down at the floor, then back at Mrs. Tanabashi, then back at me. You realize I'm going to have to terminate your employment. These notes were slipped under the door, I said louder now. There's someone on the other side. There's no one in there, and you know it. Mrs. Tanabashi kindly allows Fresh Start to use this as a facility so that new rental sisters can get practice before their real work with the hikikomori. This is your training, Shinju. But there's someone in there, I insisted, shouting this time. And then Mrs. Tanabashi let out a kind of scream of frustration that silenced me. Follow me then, pretty girl, she said. And Mr. Suzuki and I went up after her. When we went up the stairs and got to the door, she rudely stepped on my tatami, reaching into her pocket for a ring of keys. She struggled with the lock for a moment before the knob turned. And when she swung open the door, a stack of papers on the other side spread across the floor like the opening of a fan. The room was empty. There was no furniture, no closet, nothing but the heavy curtains drawn across the far wall. I stepped inside just to make sure, Mr. Suzuki entering after me. It was much smaller than I had pictured. Nothing. Mrs. Tanabashi left the keys in the lock and headed down the hall, slamming her bedroom door behind her. I don't understand, I said, staring down at the papers on the floor. The writings of 37 rental sisters in training, all unread, a rainbow of different colors and styles of stationery, glowing in the light from the open door. I was so sure. Maybe if she would just look at the handwriting again, but Mr. Suzuki interrupted me. Listen, Shinju, I understand that this was something you wanted to happen so badly that you created your own fantasy. But you've managed to deeply offend Mrs. Tanabashi, and that is not excusable. What have I done that was so wrong? I asked him. The reason she offers our company this space is because her own son was a hikikomori. He ended up hanging himself in this room. It used to be his. I understood her in that moment, the weight of her soul, and longed to console her. I never saw her again. And then, and this is exactly how it happened, I felt this strange coldness pass over me, almost like static electricity, you know? Something brushed against my hair, back and forth and back again, as if from above. I looked up at the ceiling. Time to go, Mr. Suzuki said. I left alone, headed down the stairs and into the genkan, where I put on my shoes and went out into the cold evening air. Autumn had arrived without my noticing. I stopped to stare up at Koji's window, the heavy curtains black and unmoving, before I made my way home. I try not to think about that stage in my life very often. Days of vast emptiness, waiting to be filled by something, anything that might show me my way, my purpose in being. But I think about that night all the time. In fact, I still have those notes he slipped under the door. I carry them with me in my wallet wherever I go. Would you like to see them? Thank you.
Wow, that was great. I really loved the building tension, everything about it. Thank you so much, Robert. It's our custom here at Story Hour to just pause for a moment between authors and let the work sort of resonate before we move on to the next part of the program. So we're going to do that. Just have a moment to kind of let it ring. All right, Robert Levy, everybody. Thanks so much. K.C. Grifant writes internationally published horror, fantasy, science fiction, and Weird West stories. Dozens of her short stories have appeared in podcasts, magazines, and Stoker-nominated anthologies. Her Weird Western novel, Melinda West, Monster Gunslinger, from Bridget's Gate Press, February 2023, described as a blend of Bonnie and Clyde, Meet the Witcher, and Supernatural. You have just sold me, by the way. Has received positive reviews internationally. She's the co-chair and founder of the San Diego Horror Writers Association and member of numerous writing organizations, including SIFWA. So you can learn more about KC Grifant at www.kcgriffant.com. And KC, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Robert, for that creepy story. I'll be thinking about that for a while. So I'm going to read two short stories tonight. The first one is called All Aboard, and it was first published in 34 Orchid magazine last year. You'll see clearly it's a pandemic-inspired quiet horror, and I will start it now. The city lights teemed, sending a flood of crimson and violet colors along the dirty harbor water. 24 people crammed into a single boat, weighed down with basic medication, food packets full of concentrated goop, ample sedatives, and a water waste filtration system. Just one of the many lifeboats of those that had been exposed, cast out, waiting as the last pathogen tore through society and spent itself. Maurice avoided the sedative. He wanted to be alert in case they capsized or something went wrong. He also avoided looking at one girl in the boat who wore her hair coiled in dreads gathered on top of her head, reminding him of Elle and making his chest knot up every time he glimpsed her. Most of the others around him sank into dazes, muttering occasionally. He squeezed his eyes shut, the questions running through his head like a water hose he couldn't shut off. Why me? Why me? Why me? His mind picked over the hundreds of choices he'd made in the past, branching out like the intricate lacework of his grandma's tablecloth, or like the eddies of foam in the water around them. He had gone down this path, all his choices leading him to this godforsaken boat. If only he hadn't gone to the store that morning. If only he hadn't gone down the produce aisle. If only his mask hadn't slipped. If only the exposure reader on his wrist hadn't blinked red, a warning. If only, if only, if only. You have all been exposed. One in your group carried the virus in, a protection officer had said through his face shield to Maurice and the 24 people rounded up, right there in a roped off area of the grocery store's parking lot. You need to wait it out 31 days on a Q boat before you can return. Then you'll get your orange card. Can't we go to a room or a facility? Maurice had asked. Being on a Q boat was the pits. No power, no Wi-Fi, nothing. They're all full, the protection officer said. Though he was muffled behind his shield, his irritation came through, clear as a whistle. What about sitting at home? Someone else moaned. We can't guarantee you won't break the quarantine, said the officer. No more complaints or I'll stick you with a fine on top of it. Maurice tried not to think of Elle, who he had just started to get serious with. Serious to the point where he had bookmarked a few rings on a diamond's website and imagined different ways of proposing. Was she sick too? Was she waiting for him? And his ma, he definitely couldn't think of her and how she'd be shuffling in her worn down slippers back and forth in her apartment, anxiously wondering when he'd get back. It was Maurice's first time on a Q-boat. Now, not more than a couple of days in, they had seen two passengers on nearby boats dive into the water and frantically paddle toward the shore. From boredom, madness, or fear of further contagion, Maurice had no idea. Happens all the time, said Neck Veins, who acted like he knew everything. He snorted. They'll just be sent back out here if they make the swim. Maurice didn't remember everyone's names, so he had given them nicknames in his own mind, especially the ones who didn't drug themselves into stupors. Aside from Neck Veins and Elle look-alike, there was Bug Eyes, Blue Eyes, and Tired Eyes, Skeletor, Fake Tan, and Flabby Man. So far, none of them had any symptoms, nor the telltale purple hue along one's cheeks, another of the virus's inexplicable side effects. The water looked burgundy in the twilight, making him think of runoff chemicals, blood, toxins. He hated looking at the water, but he couldn't help it. The endless lapping waves gave him vertigo, making him feel like he was about to tip over and be swallowed by the depths. I miss my apartment, he muttered. It's only a few weeks, Sun Hat Woman's voice rang high and hoarse. She said it every few minutes or maybe every few hours. She pulled one of the reflective emergency blankets over her bony knees. We'll be fine, just fine, she said. OMG, you guys, Blue Eyes wailed, wringing the corner of her tie-dye dress. Maurice fought, rolling his eyes. Blue Eyes said everything that popped into her head with the full force of a drama student. Let me guess, another shark sighting? Neck Veins said and smirked. You think every shadow in the water is Jaws. The virus, dude, Blue Eyes said and pointed at Maurice. Everything in him dropped to the bottom of the sea. His hands flew to his face. I don't feel sick, Maurice blurted, and then realized Blue Eyes' chipped fingernail pointed past him, right at Elle lookalike. The look of shame that fell over Elle lookalike's face made the rest of the passengers sit up and take notice. In the boat's solar-lit glow, Maurice could make out a faint streak of purple, like fruit juice, along her cheek. Everyone in the boat scooted back from her. You got us stuck out here, Fake Tan raged. He jabbed an orange finger at her once, twice. You probably infected us all too. I missed my daughter's baptism because of this. I didn't know, Elle lookalike stuttered. Her eyes were white orbs, rimmed with lashes longer than Elle's. Her voice was softer too. How did that happen? Blue Eyes demanded. Elle lookalike's voice got very small. My grandpa, I had to take care of him. I got laid off because of this forsaken Q-boat, Skeletor said. Long shadows ran down his gaunt face. Fake Tan nodded in agreement. I'm sorry. Elle lookalike cleared her throat, not quite a cough. For a second, Maurice wanted to drape a blanket over her shoulders and tell her she'd be okay. Let's calm down and have some medicine, maybe, Sun Hat Woman said. I have a better idea. Let's get rid of her, Skeletor said and stood, sending the boat swaying. Some of the other passengers murmured. Quick, dude, before she gets the rest of us sick and we're stuck out here longer, Blue Eyes urged. It wouldn't be the first time someone had been cast out off a Q-boat. Maurice had read a few accounts before he was out here, but never thought he'd witness it firsthand. He froze as the shouts of the passengers and protests of the woman rose. Wait, Elle looked like gasped, as Skeletor, neck veins, and fake tan led the charge to push her over. Stop, please, she shouted. The woman's eyes locked on Maurice. He couldn't move. He shrank inside himself, and a tiny part of him hoped they'd get it over with. This can't be happening, the shrunken part of himself thought. You're watching a movie, you're dreaming. He couldn't do anything. There were too many of them, but surely someone else would step in. Help me, Elle lookalike screamed again, hands shoved. Other passengers looked on, disinterested. Help her, someone, he thought. Elle lookalike went over easily, the glittering water splashing around her head. She choked and her hands flailed above the waves. Maurice huddled in his blanket, making sure to cover his cheeks, just in case. He watched the colors twirl on the water as they floated away from her screams. End. Okay, that is a depressing horror story. Now I'm going to move on. Thank you. I'm going to move on to The Sighting, another flash piece. This one was first published in Stupefying Stories in 2023, and it was inspired by my love of monsters and creatures of all kinds. The Sighting. The teeth marks were like none May had ever seen. Finally, May kept calm, though she wanted to shriek in excitement. She placed her ruler against the bark of the tree. Ralph, next to her, pushed a branch out of the way to watch as she measured. Primate-like and wider than human, May said, and snapped photos. She carefully scraped out the bark around the bite mark. Hopefully we can DNA sequence any trace of saliva. I can't believe it. May had been fascinated in the creature, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you called it, for as long as she could remember. Once she started training as a dentist assistant, she pored over Bigfoot forums and blogged her ideas. After scrutinizing photos people posted of unusual bite marks on bones, she became more convinced that the creature did indeed exist. She had doubled down on her efforts at the cost of friends and dates. Even her parents were exasperated with her obsession. Why is it so important to you? They'd ask. What does it matter? It matters, May said. She couldn't explain it. Ever since she was a kid, she had been ignored for being too quiet, too odd, too smart. But now she knew she was destined for something more, to prove Bigfoot existed. She had found Ralph through the forum, which offered tours to Bigfoot scholars around the National Forest in Southern Oregon. She would have gone on her own, but reports of missing people, usually Bigfoot hunters that had gotten hopelessly lost in the vast forest, prompted her to take extra precautions. She wasn't going to make the same mistake as they did. When she had met Ralph at the visitor center that afternoon, she quizzed him. He needed a shave beneath tired eyes, and his cargo pants could use an iron, but he was sharp in his responses. What does Bigfoot eat? She asked. Simple question, not so simple an answer, he replied. Eyewitnesses suggest it isn't fast enough to catch a deer or strong enough to wrestle a bear, but size-wise, it would need a lot of food, he said. That's right, she said. Cryptozoologists believe Bigfoot hunts large game. Some think it's smart enough to trap animals, maybe small mammals. What about vegetarian? She asked. Ralph shook his head. Accounts of bone stacking, droppings, and teeth marks suggest it really likes meat. Right, she agreed. Possibly a pure carnivore, unlike other apes and humans. She nodded, satisfied that he was sufficiently well-versed and wasn't just looking to rip off a believer like other tour guides. She was also well aware she was a solo woman going to a campsite with a man she didn't know, but his extensive positive Yelp reviews and the taser in her bag reassured her. So why do you do it? May had asked him as they climbed into his four-wheeler. Most people say Bigfoot hunters like us are delusional, she said. Or worse, she added silently, trying not to think of the sidelong glances or the muffled laughs she had gotten at school or at work when someone found her blog. Ralph looked sheepish. Honestly, he said, the money's good, and I love these woods, but I'm also in awe of the passion of this community. And he gave her a mischievous grin. Think how famous I'll be when the first real evidence is found. How famous will be, she smiled back. Don't get distracted, she told herself. But it was rare to meet a guy who didn't completely write her off, who understood just what a big deal this could be. His four-wheeler jostled over rocks as they traveled north. She had been quiet, making a pact with herself. If she didn't find something this time, maybe it was a sign that she should give up the search for good. She couldn't spend her life chasing an invisible monster after all. It was now or never. They parked, donned backpacks, and dove into the brilliant green to a spot she had traced as the epicenter of the last 3 sightings, finding the telltale marks on the tree a few hours later. It could be a wild boar, Ralph mused now, touching the teeth marks in the bark. Nope, May said, and inhaled the scent of dirt and wet leaves, feeling more alive than she had felt in a long time. This is almost a 2-inch tooth impact mark. No other known animal could do this. It's not quite what I need, but close, she said. What do you mean? Ralph asked. It's all in the teeth, she said, the back teeth to be exact. I believe Bigfoot has a distinct pattern of modified carnassial molars, unlike any known primate. Sharp back teeth, essentially, for tearing into flesh. If I can get some clear pictures of that, it would be evidence of its existence. And it would help us understand if it's a totally new kind of ape. Most people come in with vague ideas and no idea how to track, Ralph said, and looked more alert, excited even. But you actually have a good theory there. May tried not to blush as their eyes met. She couldn't remember the last time someone complimented her in real life. Ralph cleared his throat, ran a hand through his uncombed hair, and glanced down at his watch. It's getting dark, he said. We should find a campsite soon. I'm starving. I'll scope for a spot while you finish looking around. Sounds good, she said. Do you want to? May cut off, gasped, and leaned down to brush away leaves to glimpse a flash of white. A pile of bones, stacked in neat crisscrosses, large bones. She dropped her bags. Oh my God, I need to take pictures. Do these look like deer bones? She said. Ralph peered in the dimming light. Wider than deer, I'd say. Look at how they're stacked. There's real intention there, May said, and blinked back tears. All that time alone, all the friends she hadn't made, all of her countless hours looking, finally meant something. Any chance it could be a coincidence? He asked. It's way too symmetrical, she said. The stacking indicates a ritualistic observance, almost like a burial, she said, as she steadied her trembling hands to take pictures. This, together with the teeth marks and saliva samples, and she'd have it, the first real evidence of Bigfoot. She'd give interviews, maybe even on live TV, possibly a book deal, funds and teams to continue to track and understand Bigfoot. She'd be the next Jane Goodall. This gives weight to the theory that Bigfoot is extremely intelligent and potentially communicative, she continued, hushed. Ralph, I think we're close, like actually close. We have to keep going. A branch snapped and she looked up to see Ralph, looming and shaggy in the snatches of light, his figure seeming taller by the second. You're definitely on its trail, but let's eat first, he said, and yawned. That's when she saw his teeth. Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, thank you so much, KC Grifant, folks. And 2 wonderful stories. Laura, what a night. Really wonderful.
It's screaming. It's so lucky I've been muted. It's so lucky. Sorry about muting you by accident earlier, Robert.
God, week in, week out, it's just keeps being great. It's amazing.
I love the way we started out with the quiet horror and had some slightly louder quiet horror, and then we just ended with screaming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Screaming.
Just, I mean, we don't talk to each other. We don't talk to the authors about assembling a program, but often it just sort of works. And even if the stories are from completely far different corners of the genre tent, often the programming just sort of works somehow. So thank you, all of you out there, for coming to Story Hour once again. Thank you, my fabulous co-host, Laura Blackwell, our wonderful authors, Robert Levy, Casey Grifant. Please come back next week, folks, when we will have John Wiswell and Guan Un. And meanwhile, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you around. Bye, everybody.